After the defeat of the Droids and Clone forces, the Empire had created a battle plan with Grand Admiral Thrawn as a plan of action of getting the small minor races to all line up with the Empire. They had a fear-mongering campaign, convincing all the minor races that the Cardassians and that the Klingon Empire were going to enslave them. All the minor races of the Star Wars universe began pumping out their small cruisers and destroyers, and a few of them even had dreadnoughts. What was going to happen is Grand Admiral Thrawn was going to use these minor races and their fleets, such as the Hutts and other empires of that nature, to attack systematically all the minor systems of the Star Trek universe. The reason for this is he wanted a combined force to hit them all at once to stop the Ferengi, the Cardassians, any of the races that had been left, Vulcan, Andorians, any of them from forming together a giant consistent war machine. And if he was able to hit them all at once, he would be able to stop this. So their first target was for the Hutts to attack Vulcan. So the Hutts were going to use their massive military to invade Vulcan. As the Hutts entered the battle, they began attacking the Vulcan space. What they would soon realize is the Federation starships and the Federation races and the Vulcans, for an example, were far superior in technology. Their space stations could take out dozens of ships at once. They were heavily outgunned. The only advantage that the Hutts had and the other small empires was numbers. Since the ships have been greatly weakened, the Star Trek universe just didn't have the ships to hold off these massive numbers. But it would still see that the Vulcan vessels were capable of taking on dozens of ships by themselves. Especially a cruiser-class vessel of the Star Trek universe was able to take dozens of cruisers of the Star Wars universe. This is a prime example. The Star Trek ships are far superior, but the Star Wars ships outnumber them almost 30 to 1. So what they would do is their tactics were to overwhelm the Star Trek vessels. They hit them as much as they can. In some battles and some sections of space, it would be almost 100 ships to 1. Even though the Star Trek ships are far superior, there's just too many ships for even them to handle. They eventually were able to bring down most of the systems. Unfortunately for them, Vulcan was just too strong, and Vulcan was able to hold back. With the ships breaking through and attacking Vulcan space, a new warship was derived by the Empire. This new vessel was carrying Type X phasers seen on the Galaxy-class starships. It was a hybrid ship and began attacking the Vulcan vessels. These Vulcan cruisers were quite a bit more powerful. Vulcans did fall victim to some of the new technology. This new vessel was quite sufficient. It was pretty maneuverable, which was very different than any of the other Imperial ships. It was using thrusters which had been commendated from the Klingon Empire. It was using phasers from the Federation. It was a hybrid. It was quite efficient, but it wasn't strong enough. As soon as Vulcan realized what was going on, they realized they absolutely needed to take this new hybrid fleet out as soon as possible. The Vulcan home fleet began upgrading their ships. They began taking space station level Type 12 phaser banks and putting them on their cruisers. As soon as the cruisers entered the battle, they were preparing for one last stand to hold Vulcan, what would end up being one of the greatest losses for the Empire, for they had not realized how incredibly powerful the Vulcan cruisers really were. As the Vulcan cruisers engaged the enemy force, they obliterated them. With the new Vulcan warships destroying the new hybrid fleet from Grand Admiral Thrawn, All that was left was for the Vulcan fleet to start wiping out the remaining forces and start taking Vulcan space back. The Vulcans began attacking everything they could, and every ship that came in their way was obliterated. These new hybrid Vulcan dreadnoughts were incredibly powerful. They systematically went through the systems, wiping out every single Imperial ship they could see, systematically. Unfortunately for the Empire, their cruisers are just too weak and too small and not shielded enough to do anything. They were literally obliterated. It became quite evident that Androsia just didn't have the ships to defend itself, and its technology was nowhere as advanced as Vulcan. It didn't take very long before they were overrun, and their ships and their stations were taken over. Eventually what would happen is the Empire was going to take the stations that were captured and actually begin remodifying their ships to use them against other strategic targets within the area. So you eventually had fleets of Imperial ships, hybrid Imperial ships, and even some Androsian ships, large cruisers, were now in the Empire's hand. This was a devastating blow for the remaining Federation forces. The other hybrid vessels were small cloaked vessels using torpedoes. This was quite advanced for the Imperial forces. They had never had the technology to put such powerful weapons on such small vehicles before. The hybrid vessels of the Imperial forces were quite powerful and were giving the Androsians the battle they didn't expect. They tried to destroy any vessels that were captured by the Empire. They didn't want the Empire to gain any more technology than they already had. So any kind of Androsian class vessels that were captured by the Empire were destroyed. The next great battle would be against the Orion Syndicate. Syndicate was a powerful empire, had sustained for generations. Their technology was advanced and they were a very warlike race. They were able to hold back the incoming fleets quite efficiently, too efficiently. Grand Admiral Thrawn had realized that even with the Androsian vessels, their new hybrid ships, they were having too hard of a time fighting off the Orion. The Orion Syndicate was just too powerful and they were taking too many losses. Something needed to be done. A plan was derived to shut down the Orion Syndicate. Unaware to the enemy fleet this was a trick. The Orion Syndicate didn't even realize what was going on. A covert operation had been employed to create a super powerful explosive weapon capable of disrupting a planetary core system. The idea was to push all of Grand Admiral Thraw's forces with the Andorian forces, making them think they're making a ploy for the homeworld to take it out. But in actuality, they just wanted the entire fleet to be in one spot. The idea was to bring all the ships to bear, force them to fight within the planetary system. They would then use their hyperspace jump to get out of the system right before the planet exploded. When the planet exploded, the idea was to take out as many of the enemy forces as possible. This would destroy the Orion Syndicate's army in one fell swoop and remove one planet if it was completely unnecessary. Grand Admiral Thraw's plan went out without a hitch. As the fleet continued attacking the Orion Syndicate, taking out as many ships as they could, letting them think that they were battling a war of attrition, and that the Orion Syndicate did have the upper hand, they were greatly mistaken. Shortly after the tide of the war switched, the bomb went off, taking out the Orion Syndicate with them, allowing the fleet to escape, jumping into hyperspace. With the system unguarded, it was an easy target for the Empire. They began sending ships to Outer Rim worlds. With the Orion Syndicate defeated, all was left was a mopping up mission. As Imperial forces began to land on planets, they began butchering the inhabitants. With the Andorians and the Orion Syndicate defeated, they've been prepared for another onslaught, this time to attack the home world of Gorn in the Gorn system. This would end up being a fatal mistake. They were not prepared for the strength of the Gorn Empire. As the Empire moved in, the Gorn forces literally wiped them out with almost no effort. The Imperial forces sent were nowhere a match for the Gorn vessels. The Gorn vessels obliterated the incoming fleet. After the devastating defeat at Gorn home system, the Empire was crippled. Their forces were left in disarray. They had very few ships left. And this gave the opportunity for the Federation forces to strike back. Commando troopers had come in and started wiping out some of the held systems. This destruction of the Orion homeworld had sparked something within the Federation remaining forces. A guerrilla tactics became standardized force. They began using all kinds of new technology, suits and armor and shielding they had stolen from the Empire, and as well as integrated into Trek technology. The Federation had begun creating super soldiers. The time to fight back was now, and they did fight. Every inch of every planet.
We have been sent here to fight alongside our Federation allies.